Hey y'all, I am VictorE. I help provide insight to empower. And today I wanted to touch on something I had on in a last video, which is toxicity. In the last video, it was around toxic masculinity and how we approach that in an effective way. Just to give you the cliff notes on that video, when we talk about toxic masculinity, we talk about what it is that men learn and what women expect of men, especially in the unknowing sense, that subconscious programming that we're not super aware of. Toxicity in itself, to me, I always picture what comes to mind is this sort of green, misty, kind of wavy liquid, and that's on the surface what we deal with another person. It's what we deal with person to person, and it is what triggers us. Like this, this guy is being hyper masculine and he's not, maybe not grounded or grounded in his own sense of self-worth, and he's using these frames as, portrayed by Hollywood and parenting of like what a man should be. And that's, I feel like we all know that about womanizing, selfish, overly aggressive, roid rage kind of thing, and running the spectrum on that. But toxicity, feminine, too passive, too lenient, very escapist, or toxic masculinity, being hyper aggressive, are merely the symptoms, right? It's that green mist. Like if there was like a green mist protruding from me, we're not looking at the green mist. It's like when I look at or treat a person who's kind of dealing with this stuff, or within myself especially, it's okay, I see that stuff, and that's what I'm holding space for. I'm holding space for this woundedness, right, that may be unpleasant to be around. And I would invite you to exercise boundaries, right, if you're not in this work. But what I'm looking for is, where is that, green mist toxicity coming from? What's the wound underneath, right? And that, a helpful reference point, in RP, as I like to call them, is childhood. Where's the inner child? I mean, this woundedness is, to me, like, the wounded child holding up a flag, being like, okay, this is where it's coming from, please address this part. So in any, let's say, like, toxic masculinity, I'm looking at where is the emotional bypassing or shutting down happening. Let's dig into that. Let's put words to that feeling. And man, woman, non-binary, it always comes down to being and feeling seen, heard, loved unconditionally. That doesn't mean that we're passive, or that we, take on other people's stuff as our own, or that we let the behaviors go unchecked or unaddressed, right? In being a light worker, it's really just using consciousness, light, awareness, to shed a spotlight, awareness, on the behavior, and being like, okay, where is this coming from? Open curiosity. Where's this coming from? Right? It seems like okay, let's use myself as an example. After the military, being, using the woundedness that I had accrued in my childhood and adolescence, having that weaponized in the military, especially like me, I was in the infantry, coming home and not knowing how to disarm that, my aggression or, violent way of communicating, and the ways in which I was violent against myself, especially depression, rage turned inward. Those are, that's the wounded child holding up the flag and being like, hey, this is the symptom. This is the symptom right here. This is where deeper inquiry and investigation needs to happen. So there's, one of the things that would trigger me was like my neighbor would leave their dogs out, especially in inclement weather, and the dog was like barking, 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 like scratching at the door, and inside my neighbors are like just completely checked out, not present, not grounded, on their phones or watching TV and ignoring the problem. Now, why was this so triggering for me? And maybe for a lot of people this may resonate with you. For me personally, it was very triggering, because that's how I felt as a child. My mom being, schizophrenic, dealing with major depression and her own traumas, and growing up in that environment, and her not knowing how to communicate in an effective way or love in an effective way. For me, experiencing a lot of abandonment, rejection, not feeling seen or heard, or having my needs met, like food or certainty or safety, security. Now I'm seeing this dog who's being ignored, neglected, and on the one hand, the toxicity, the woundedness, the toxicity, the symptom is I'm getting very angry, and I need to, like speak up for this dog, and digging further, sitting with that, being like, okay, why is that? Why do you need to do this in such a reactive way? We all want to I feel like as a community oriented species, as humans, we want to help each other out. Deep down, on some level, we want to help each other out, and especially like other living things. But to do so in such a volatile way in that time begs, curiosity, begs inquiry, digging deeper. So I sat with it. Why is it that I'm getting so? It's like, okay, and I was in therapy at the time, and that's what I told my therapist. It's like, oh, like that. I felt like that dog, and in that moment, my way of showing up for my inner child was to go to my neighbor and be like, and I was tearing up because there was so much emotion coming through. Like, hey, I need you to take better care of your pets, please. They had other dogs, and they had run away, or they had been neglected. There were at least 3 dogs that I know of that had run away. And in the moment, the best I could do was to I felt like I was holding a bull by some chains and just doing my best, or a horse, just to try and keep it from rampaging. And that's something that I had drawn in art therapy a few years before that. And I wasn't proud of the way that I handled it at all. So it's okay, so then I sat with that. I'm like, okay, how can I communicate better, more effectively? So I came back later on, I was kind of hit me. It was okay, the next time, a way to curtail or anticipate, my inner, in my men's coaching group, we call it our villain, the one that wants to protect the inner child in very ineffective ways. The next time my villain shows up and wants to react like that or act out in that way, I can show up better and in a more effective way by simply exchanging numbers. We had lived next door to that guy for 10 years, and we never exchanged numbers. It's okay, so we did in that moment. It's okay, next time, if I notice that you've let the dogs out, and if you left your dogs out and they've been out for a while, I can just shoot you a text, be like, hey, can you let your dogs in? Or hey, the dogs have been out for a while and they're kind of sounds like they want to get back in. I can just shoot them over a text, and we can carry on in a more communal, harmonious way. And in doing that, there was definitely a shift, and I leveled up, sure, but I carried on in a more harmonious way with myself, with my inner villain, my, you know, what we usually call to as like the saboteur, the one that like wants to sabotage our happiness, which is not really the case. But more on that in another video. I'm gonna run inside of Michael's to get some paper palettes for painting. I hope you found this helpful. I'm gonna be elaborating on this more and sharing my experiences, so I hope you stick around, follow, like, share. Peace.